And welcome to the webinar this evening, which is your summer prescription, Enjoy Clean and Healthy Lakes. We do have a couple more webinars happening before the summer's over. Next month, we have what plants are growing in the lake, and later in August, we have cyanobacteria update. Both of those are very popular this year, especially since we've had so many cyanobacteria blooms happening. So be sure to tune into those. And we will be presenting this evening, myself and Krystal, Costa Balanoff. She's our conservation program manager. And I'm Erin Mastine, the outreach program manager here at New Hampshire Lakes. And just some meeting management stuff. The session's being recorded. Our participants will be muted for the duration of the webinar. If you leave your camera on, remember that other people in the meeting will be able to see you. And to limit bandwidth, which I don't think we'll have a problem with tonight, but you may want to turn your camera off. And you can submit questions in the chat box at any time. That's found at the bottom of your screen. If you're familiar with Zoom, you probably already know this, but for those of you that are not, chat is down here. And you can type anything in and everyone will see that, and we will try to respond to you right away. If we don't know an answer while the other one of us is presenting, we will save that till the end of the presentation and get those questions answered for you. And tomorrow you'll receive an evaluation form from us. Please share your feedback. Let us know if you have any ideas of future topics you'd like to see. We're always wondering what our participants are interested in learning, and it's very possible I'll be putting together a series for the fall, so I'd love to get your feedback. You'll also receive an email with links for the webinar recordings, so we'll get those posted. You can share those with your friends or colleagues. Oh, and I just skipped over that one, but we are very fortunate that we are sponsored by Grapponi Automotive. They're a wonderful organization. They've been a longtime supporter of New Hampshire Lakes, and they have made this program possible for the summer. And they're just a great organization. If you are possibly looking for a vehicle, strongly recommend them. I've gotten both of my previous two vehicles through them, and they just have great customer service. And again, we're your hosts this evening, myself and Krystal. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Krystal for the first part of the presentation.
That's my cue. Okay, well, tonight, as Erin mentioned, we'll be talking about your summer RX, why clean and healthy lakes are good for you. So let's just jump on in. As most of you probably know by now, we have approximately 1,000 lakes and ponds here in New Hampshire, and that's wonderful. And they've become a really important aspect of what it means to live or recreate in New Hampshire, from our improving our quality of life to playing an important role in our economy, as well as our natural heritage. And when we're looking at the summertime here, there really is something for everybody when it comes to enjoying our lakes, whether you are a boater of various types. There's sailing or canoeing, but I don't think that canoeing is necessarily good for me. Anytime you put my husband and I in a canoe together, we end up fighting with one another. I am much more of a kayaker. That's where I get my rest and relaxation. But for the adventurous types, there's also water skiing or tubing. And I love this picture. This is our president, Andrea Lamoureux, and every time I see it, it just makes my heart glad, as well as wake surfing, and then of course fishing. We've got some really high value fishing spots here in New Hampshire. If you're a fisherman, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And then of course swimming, and this photo calls up so many memories from my childhood growing up in Nottingham. I had a friend with a beach house on Pawtuckaway Lake, and her house was a popular summer hangout spot for very obvious reasons, and we would just stay in the water until we were completely blue. It was great. And if you are a pet owner, your arm is probably aching just seeing this picture and recollecting the hours and hours of playing fetch in the water with your beloved pets. So clean lakes they're truly just, they're good for us. They're good for our lives. They're good for our well-being. They bring us peace and exercise and fun and joy. They make us happier and more connected to ourselves and just better at what we do. And this is a concept that's explored in this really wonderful book that I think everybody should read by Dr. Wallace Nichols called Blue Mind, The Science of Blue Mind. And this is basically the research behind how water affects our bodies and our brains. And you know, on an actual neurological and biogeochemical level, makes us healthier and heals aspects of our minds. And you know, I think that we've all probably experienced this a little bit, just being around lakes and having that feeling. And I know that today I had a very typical stressful day at work. I had so much on my to-do list. I was stressed out. There wasn't enough time of the day. I had this webinar to present this evening, and I was just a stressed out mess. And I got home and sat down at my computer to get ready for this evening, and I heard the loon call through my window. And that's all it took. Just thinking about the loon and hearing that call, and you know, visualizing the lake and the loon with its little baby for the first time in so many years. And I just felt this moment of like, ah, and it all went away. And I went from my red mind of stress and anxiety, and you know, when that constant sonophone is just playing in your mind, to blue mind, when it all just sort of quiets down and you get to reconnect to yourself. And water does that for us. And I just think that is really cool. And you know, it's amazing how something like just hearing the loon call was enough, you know, that visualization practice was enough to really trigger all of those feel-good hormones, the dopamine and the oxytocin and all those things that make us feel really good, you know, when we're laughing or something like that. That water can have that effect on us. And I just want to use these really great graphics from discoverboating.com, which is built off of that book by Dr. Nichols as well, exploring the concept of blue mind. And you know, they polled some people, and 72% of them agreed that they feel so much happier after spending some time out on the water. And I love this statistic in the middle here about, like, don't you think that our kids would probably be more present and more in the moment if we were going on something like a water recreation trip versus a road trip or something like that? If you're out on a boat, or if you're in a kayak, or you know, out on the water where there's so much to look at and explore and just be present and go swimming or whatever, nobody's going to want to desire to be somewhere else. There's no need for escapism. Nobody has to pull out TikTok and get away. You want to be present because it feels so much better. And it's no wonder, because you know, we're mostly made up of water. All the wonderful things that it does for us. And I love this graphic here, because through my career with New Hampshire Lakes, this aspect of creativity here, I have met so many lake residents and learned that they are artists. And what a wonderful thing that they come to the lake to increase their creativity and be more productive. And you know, I feel like that happened to me earlier today when I sat down and I captured my blue mind. I went from this, you know, constant state of stress to just being able to focus again. And that is just so wonderful and awe-inspiring. And I feel really grateful that I have access to that in my life, and that we have these wonderful lakes here in New Hampshire, that we get to live in a state that has clean lakes already. You know, we don't live in an area where we have a big problem yet, but there's a reason why I get up every day and I go to work and I do my job to make sure that our lakes are protected, because it's important. There are things that threaten the health of our lakes. And aquatic invasive species is probably one of the most obvious things. If you haven't visited a water body with an aquatic invasive species, you probably don't want to. We do have water bodies in New Hampshire that have infestations of one or more invasive plant or animal. And I mean, just aesthetically, what's the problem with invasive species? This is a water body that has milfoil in it. And then if we go back a couple slides, this is a water body, this is Newfound Lake, that has no milfoil in it. There's a pretty big difference between those two pictures, just visually. One makes you go, ugh, and the other makes you go, huh. So there's that. And these invasive species are just essentially plants and animals that didn't grow up here. They came over from Europe or Asia, and not only do they impact the aesthetic of our water bodies, but they have large environmental and economic impacts as well. They can impact our enjoyment of our lakes through recreation. There have actually been, instances of people getting caught up in invasive species like milfoil while swimming. So there is a swimming danger associated with invasive plants. Invasive animals can turn the nice soft bottom sediment that we're so used to here in New Hampshire into this sharp shell hash that can cut up your feet. And if you're a shorefront property owner, there is a study by the University of New Hampshire, Dr. John Halstead published, that shows that, and this was 10 years ago now, so I'd be curious to see that study go on again and see how it's changed. But back then, invasive species could reduce your shoreline property values by up to 30%. And it wasn't just shorefront property owners, it was actually a pretty large radius of the lake. So we've got our recreation, we've got our aesthetics, we've got our economic impact. And then if we look at the ecology of the lake, a healthy lake is supposed to be an abundance of different plants and animals all living together and reproducing and eating each other and having a grand old time. But when you have an invasive species, it outcompetes all of that diversity and it creates a monoculture. And that is an unhealthy lake that has lots of issues. So invasive species, we think that they originally got here hitchhiking in ballast water. So big boats come over here for commerce, and then the water that they brought with them gets into the water in our lakes, and voila, introduces an invasive species that then has no natural predators and gets to reproduce without any predation pressure to keep its population in check. But these days, we know that invasive species are hitchhiking from lake to lake and water body to water body. Primarily, I know that sure, some birds can transport them, people say, and of course, some people do unknowingly dump out their aquariums, which can introduce invasive species, but we know that the majority are spread by boaters that just haven't properly cleaned, drained, and dried their boats. We know that because most new infestations are found in boating channels, near the boat launches. Invasive species are found on boats during courtesy boat inspections. So this is a huge issue. We have invasive species in about 90 water bodies here in New Hampshire. Unfortunately, this is up by one this year, and we do have some water bodies that have more than one aquatic invasive species. So we work really, really hard to educate the public about preventing the spread and about, which water bodies do have infestations, and making sure that everybody is doing their part to clean, drain, and dry their boats, trailers, and gear so that it doesn't spread even further. There are a ton of plants that we are concerned about here in New Hampshire. All of these plants featured here are in at least one water body here in New Hampshire. I'm really proud to say that we recently had a water chestnut save through our lake host courtesy boat inspection program. So that's that spiky little seed pod there in the middle, and a lake host, by whatever wonderful power she has, spotted this little walnut-sized seed pod on the carpeted trailer of a boat after the boat had launched. And now these seed pods can remain viable out of water for up to 16 years. So that is an astounding save for a lake host to have. And, you know, lake hosts do find invasive species on boats during their, you know, their regular inspections. And thankfully that number is decreasing over the years. But another thing that we're concerned about is invasive animals. And these are much, much more difficult to see because they can be spread in a drop of water. We do have the Asian clam here in New Hampshire. It's in about 7 water bodies. We do have the Chinese mystery snail. It's relatively widespread. To date, we do not have quagga mussel, spiny water flea, or zebra mussel, but we are feeling pressure on all sides from other states that do have these invasive species. So we really, really, really want to keep them out of here, because having an invasive species can really impact that blue mind feeling, sort of take away from it and bring back that red mind. This grumpy little gremlin here is upset at having to wear water shoes because this is a lake that's infested with zebra mussel. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the nice soft bottom sediment of this lake has been converted to razor sharp shell hash. So you can no longer enjoy it barefoot. So nobody wants that. Once an invasive species is in a water body, it is extremely difficult to remove. And this is just talking about invasive plants. They're labor intensive, they are expensive, and I'm talking about like $50,000 a year kind of expensive, mostly on the taxpayers. They're very difficult to control. It takes a long time. And it can be almost impossible to get rid of. Not unheard of. We do have success stories of lake communities really digging down, you know, working together and making sure that they get it out of the water body. And over the course of 10 years, you know, they could say that they were officially milfoil free. But when it comes to invasive animals, we've got a little bit more of a problem. You know, through the Lake Host program and through education outreach efforts, we've slowed the spread of aquatic invasive plants, but invasive animals are a relatively new thing. And they can spread in a drop of water. And at this point in time, we have no ability to manage for invasive animals. Of course, research is going on, but right now, if your water body has Asian clam, there's really nothing that can be done about it. And so it's just very, very important that boaters are cleaning, draining, and drying their boats, trailers, and gear, whether you have a motorboat or a kayak or a blow-up raft. Let it dry for 5 days to make sure that you are not spreading these things around. So invasive species are not the only thing that can interrupt our blue mind by threatening the health of our lakes. We also have a concerning issue with polluted water. And what that is when polluted groundwater or polluted runoff water is getting into our lakes and carrying nasty things with it and affecting the water quality and potentially making it unsafe for recreation. So if you think about our landscape, the watershed that we live in, it's kind of like a giant toilet bowl, not to be crass. But when we have precipitation events, whether that is rain or snow melt, it's kind of like flushing a toilet, and all of that water drains down into a central area, and that central area is our lakes. And so it's bringing all of that crud with it down into our lakes, kind of like a funnel would. And this is made even worse as land use changes. So green areas do a really good job at slowing down and soaking up and filtering out pollution from water before it reaches our lakes. But as people build houses and roads and driveways and all of that stuff, it creates more impervious surface, and that speeds up, you know, it reduces the amount of area that water can soak into. So it accelerates it, it speeds up and creates more erosion and more opportunities for gross things to get into our lakes. What is that stuff that I'm talking about? Quite a bit. There are a lot of different pollutants that threaten our lakes, and I'll go through these really quickly. First of all, we have bacteria. We can look to our pets a lot for sources of bacteria. But the big elephant in the room is your septic system. Septic systems, particularly septic systems around lakes, are chronically outdated and unmaintained. So if you live on a lake and you have a septic system, you better sit here and ask yourself, when's the last time you inspected that and had it pumped? You know, the typical life of the septic system is about 20 years. And I know firsthand by working with property owners around lakes that some septic systems around the lake are 30 years old, 40 years old. I even was on a property the other day that had a 60-year-old septic system. And so those systems were installed a very, very long time ago before environmental regulations existed. And sometimes they are in the water table, so they're getting seasonally flooded, which is definitely not a good thing. And they're just not designed to, you know, deal with the amount of water and chemicals and stuff that we put into a septic system in our daily lives. So bacteria gets into our lakes. It can make swimmers sick. It can make pets sick. And, you know, if you see a beach closure sign, this is often one of the reasons why you might see that. Then, of course, we have sediment. That's actual soil and sand eroding from the landscape and getting into our lakes. That can be from shorelines getting eroded and collapsing and bringing soil in. But oftentimes it is dirt roads. Dirt roads are an enormous contributor of sediment to our lakes. And if you live on a dirt road, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about when it rains and you get that river of chocolate milk that runs down it. And then the next day you have this 3-inch deep gully left behind. All of that sediment, all of that sand that was eroded during that rainstorm ended up in the lake somewhere. Now, sediment not only impacts wildlife habitat, smothering, you know, fish nesting beds and things like that, but it also brings in phosphorus with it. So it carries nutrients into our lakes and heavy metals and things like that. And of course, nutrients, as we all probably know by now, are one of the leading causes of algae blooms and cyanobacteria blooms. They also impact the oxygen in our lakes. As that algae bloom and then decompose, it sucks up all of the oxygen in the water, and that can lead to a really dramatic event called a fish kill. So that happens occasionally in our lakes here in New Hampshire. It's not too common, but it does sometimes happen. So what else can get into our lakes? Toxic things from our cars, from, you know, aging, forgotten barrels of pesticide outside of people's sheds and things like that. You know, that speaks for itself. But then one thing I don't think a lot of people think of are chlorides, road salt and water softeners. So chlorides are extremely toxic to aquatic life. But the issue with chlorides that, you know, is nearest and dearest to my heart is that once it is in a water body, we can't get it out again. And so there's all kinds of things that we can do to remediate water quality if too much nutrients have gotten into it. We can clean up our act, we can plant our shorelines, we can stop, you know, runoff from getting to the lake, and eventually it will heal and come back from that. But once salt is in the lake, it's in there, and we've got no method for getting it back out again. And so we have been seeing a salinization of our lakes over the years in a manner that's relatively startling. So we want to make sure that we get on top of that, because one thing that you may not know is that milfoil can persist in brackish waters, and that means brackish water is water that is part fresh, part salt. And so as our lakes get more salty, we may actually make them more susceptible to aquatic invasive species. And then the last thing I'll talk about is thermal pollution. So this is temperature pollution, and that's probably a strange thing to think about. But if you are a trout living in the lake, you really depend on cold water in order to live a healthy life. And thermal pollution occurs when people cut down all the trees along the shoreline, and we lose the shade that provides you know, some cooling effect on the lakes. But it also occurs when water runs over really, really hot pavement and then gets into the lake. So, you know, those days where you can fry an egg on the concrete, well, think about all the water running over that and then getting really, really hot and then getting into our lakes. So that also threatens our lake as well. Now we know that almost all of the water quality problems that we have in our lakes or that are growing in our lakes, because we do have relatively clean lakes, but we've got our eyes on some issues. We know that these problems are largely attributed to polluted water runoff and largely due to our own impact on the landscape, which can, you know, can make our waters unsuitable for swimming. And that can be made so much worse by, you know, the changing weather patterns that we've seen. This summer has been such a great example of that because we had more rain in the course of 1 week this summer than we had during the entire season last year. So we're having these really, you know, strange periods of extended drought. And then when it does rain, it's a torrential downpour and we get 3 inches of rain in, you know, in 30 minutes. And that's just not the way it's supposed to work. And so invasive species and this polluted runoff, you know, are issues, but then we have these changing weather patterns that make the issue so much worse. So what are we going to do about it? We obviously have to do something because we need our lakes. We need to be able to enjoy our lakes. They're so important to our way of life here in New Hampshire, and we're partially responsible for what's going on. So we can't just pretend that they're going to take care of themselves. I'm going to turn it over to Erin. She can give a little bit of a background about why we do what we do.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about New Hampshire Lakes so you can get a better understanding of what it is that we are trying to do to prevent some of what Krystal just talked about. We were founded in 1992. We are a nonprofit organization and we are the voice for all of New Hampshire's 1,000 lakes, which makes us a little unique here in the state. Our mission is to keep our lakes clean and healthy for now and in the future. You know, Krystal just gave us some great examples of things that are, you know, threatening our lakes. And a big part of what we're doing is trying to fight those things so that not only can we enjoy them, but also our future generations. I have a young daughter, a 6-year-old daughter, and we spend quite a lot of time on the lake. And I want her to be able to do that with her kids someday. So we also work with partners to promote clean water policies and responsible use and inspire the public to take care of our lakes. And we work with local groups. We work with a lot of different local lake associations and all different kinds of groups, different environmental groups here in the state. We work with state legislators to help shape and form the laws that are, you know, helping maintain the lake, the property edges, and all those good things Krystal was also talking about. We develop programs and policies to inspire action and to keep our lakes clean, doing things like we are doing here tonight, presenting webinars to educate people about what's going on. We do have 3 program areas. We have our advocacy program. Michelle Davis is our advocacy program and policy manager, and she does a lot of work at the State House, working with legislators, helping to shape and form those laws. And we also have our conservation program. Of course, Krystal here is our conservation program manager, and those 2 big programs that most people know us from are our lake host program. Our lake hosts are, you know, just doing an amazing job. They're at our boat ramps in the hot sun and in the rain, like this summer, and they're checking our boats and trailers and gear to make sure that we're not spreading invasive species. And they have made 6 saves, I believe. So maybe more than that now, actually, I think this summer so far. And then we have our new program, Lake Smart. And that is a program where people can, from the comfort of their own homes, go online and take a survey and answer some simple questions about what they're doing on their property to see how lake smart they might be. you know, questions like, do you know where your septic system is? So those are the kinds of things that you might see if you take the Lake Smart survey, and then we will review that and get back to you and let you know if there are things that you could improve. And if you wish, we can come to your property and take a look around and make some great suggestions of things that you can do. Or if you're already Lake Smart, you can get our coveted Lake Smart award sign that you see right there and hang that up for all your neighbors and friends to see. And then we have our outreach program, which, like I mentioned, is bringing this webinar to you tonight. So we really try to help educate the public, let them know what's going on, letting them know if there's a cyanobacteria bloom happening at their favorite lake, teaching them about their watershed and things that they can be doing. We have had, some of you may know, our Watershed Warriors program, which was designed for kids, that we are now teaching other local lake associations to deliver. So we have all kinds of great programs happening here. And I think I skipped over another. Yes, there we go. So, so just like lakes help keep us healthy, we need to help keep them healthy too. You know, the lakes can't take care of themselves, so we are responsible for doing our part to make sure that they're staying healthy, so that they are nice and blue and inviting and help with our blue mind, so that we are not taking them for granted. And there are 10 ways that you can help, and Krystal is going to take it over from here once again and go over these tips with you.
Well, I thought you'd never ask. So 10 ways. So we don't want to depress you. This is supposed to be about blue mind, and talking about all the negative things that can impact our lakes is probably cultivating some red mind, but don't worry, because there are so many things that you can do to continue keeping our lakes clean and healthy, so that our kids and our grandkids after that can continue to enjoy this wonderful resource that we have. So the very, very important thing is, if you own shorefront property, if you live on the lake, please keep your shoreline densely vegetated. I don't want to shame this property, you know, all the way on the left there, but you don't want to see lawn all the way down to the lake. What we want to see is a nice, densely vegetated buffer in between your house and the water body. And so this middle picture here is a much better example of what a vegetated shoreline can look like. Now, not every shoreline is going to look just like this. And one thing that, you know, I want to let people know is, just because you have a vegetated shoreline doesn't mean that it has to impact your view shed. So you can have trees and shrubs on your shorefront and still have a perfect crystal clear view of the lake. You just trim those shrubs down nice and low to about 3 feet tall, and then prune up any branches on your trees. You don't have to take anything down, just clean up a little bit and you'll be able to see just fine. So I think most people, when they buy a lake house, they think that the first thing they should do is cut all those trees down so they can see the lake, but that is the worst thing that you can do. So take a look at your shoreline and evaluate it. Plant a tree, plant a blueberry bush, plant a bunch of blueberry bushes so that your grandkids can come and pick blueberries in the summertime. One thing I really want to encourage folks to do is, if you live on a lake and you know that there are people that need help on their shorelines, they need some help with landscaping because they're less able-bodied or they're starting to get long in the tooth, maybe you can put together a volunteer day and help out by maybe helping your neighbors plant some plants for them. If you can get together and do some community service, you can have a really big impact on the lake. So vegetated shorelines, very, very important. Maybe you can even sit down and challenge yourself to achieve the coveted Lake Smart Award that Erin mentioned earlier. These plants are so important because any water that's coming off of our property or coming off of our roads or anything like that, they're going to hit this vegetated buffer. The roots are going to soak it up, slow it down, and filter it out before it gets into the lake. And as I mentioned earlier, they also provide shade. that is really important habitat for wildlife. Now, beyond that, if you do have a lawn, you do not need to fertilize your lawn. I know that this might be a rude awakening for some people, but our soils in New Hampshire are already very, very fertile. And this fertilizer, whether it is chemical fertilizer, compost, or manure, it's all the same thing. It's all going to bring nutrients into our lakes, and it really should be avoided at all costs, because that is just going to speed up the growth of nuisance plants, of algae and cyanobacteria growth, and all the things that we don't want. If you really, really feel passionately about needing to use fertilizer, I challenge you to get your soil tested first. You can get a rapid test at most hardware stores. You can also send a sample into the University of New Hampshire, and they'll tell you exactly what the composition of your soil is, so you'll know if you need any other nutrients in there. And if it comes back and you do end up needing some nutrients in your soil, please use a phosphorus-free fertilizer. And you can determine if your fertilizer is phosphorus-free by looking at that middle number on the bag. It should be a 0. This is particularly important if you are within the protected shoreland area. If you live on the lake, you're most likely in the protected shoreland area, and you really, really need to be good about not introducing any phosphorus to your property. What else can you do? When you're doing yard work, keep your leaves, keep your lawn clippings, keep them far away from the water, because as those things wash into the lake, they're going to break down, and they contribute to that gross muck layer that, you know, we all loathe when you jump into the lake and your feet just like squish down into the grossness at the bottom. Nobody wants muck in the lake, and you can help by not throwing your leaves into the lake. So this is one thing you can do. I don't know a lot of people that blow or rake their leaves into the lake anymore. I think this is probably an issue of times past, but if you do it, now's your chance to stop. This is such a silly picture. Please don't wash anything in the lake. Soap contains phosphorus. So whether you are polishing up your boat or washing your car in the driveway or giving your pet a bath, please make sure that that soapy water is not getting anywhere near the lake. All of these things carry pollutants into our water bodies, even if it claims that it is a biodegradable soap. Don't use it anywhere near the lake. Keep it far, far away. Another thing you can do is stabilize your footpaths. So how you walk around your property, how you access the water, putting down some gravel or some mulch or something like that is going to hold the soil in place and prevent it from being washed into the water. And in most cases, it also provides you a much safer way of walking over your landscape and accessing your water. So the thing about footpaths that most people don't realize is that any bare soil on your property, any sort of bare path that you've made from your foot traffic, that is eroding. Even if you can't see it, bare soil is exposed soil, and exposed soil is eroding soil. So every time it rains or every time it's windy, tiny little soil particles are coming off of that little eroded area and carrying phosphorus with it, and it is getting into the lake. And then my favorite topic, please maintain your septic system. If you could have 2 takeaways from this PowerPoint, please maintain your shoreline buffer, plant it out, restore it, enhance it, whatever you need to do, and then inspect your septic system. And not just your tank, also inspect your leaching area. Your leach field is a commonly overlooked component of your system. It is absolutely essential to ensuring that effluent is properly processed before it enters the groundwater and before it makes its way into our lakes. So, you know, some of the big red flags are if there's odor or standing water, or if you see this abnormally green grass when everything else is dead. But you should have it inspected regardless. You should have your septic system inspected every year, and your leach field as well. Because sometimes when a system is malfunctioning or in total failure, it's actually not this obvious. So if it's been a while or if you know your system is old, you really ought to reach out to a certified professional. An inspection can cost, you know, $300, but that peace of mind to know that you are not polluting the lake with human waste is so, so very important. So maintain your septic system. Another thing you can do while we're on the topic of poop is please don't feed the waterfowl. If you have an issue on your shoreline with ducks and geese visiting you, know that they will avoid any area that a dog can hide behind. So nice open grassy lawns, beaches, things like that. The ducks and geese love them. So you can keep them off of your property by planting some shrubs. And if you feed them, please know that ducks and geese have more than enough food and forage in the natural environment. And they really don't need to be depending on us for their nutrition. All of that waterfowl waste contains an enormous amount of nutrients. And I sound like a broken record, but nutrients accelerate the plant and algae growth and particularly potentially toxic cyanobacteria growth in our lakes. And we all know that cyanobacteria is something that we really want to get a handle on and stop it from occurring in our water bodies. And then to prevent those aquatic invasive species that I was lamenting about earlier, all you need to do is practice 3 simple steps. If you clean, drain, and dry all of your boats, trailers, and recreational gear, I said it before, whether it's a motorboat, a kayak, whether it is your floaties or your stand-up paddleboard, clean, drain, and dry for 5 days in between water bodies, and you can prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species and prevent that nasty stuff from getting into our lakes. But all of these things aren't the only thing that you can do. You know, at the personal level, you can do all of these things, but at the community level, Erin, what else can they do?
Yes, so it's an easy one and it's probably very obvious, and that's join your local lake or watershed protection groups. We always encourage people to look out to see if there is one in their area. Sometimes people don't even know if there's a local lake association. If you go to our website, there is a section there that lists all of our lake association partners with links to their websites if they have them. And if you don't see one on there, you can certainly always give us a call and we can either point you in the right direction or help you form one, actually, if there isn't one already available to you.
And I just want to put a plug in here about why it's so important to join your local lake or watershed group, because these groups actually get work done and they have membership dues so that community members around the lake can, you know, pay $50 a year to make sure that the lake or watershed group has a budget to address things like aquatic invasive species or, you know, education, outreach, and stuff like that. So this is a really important thing for lakes to have, is to have a really well-run and well-funded local association that's directly advocating boots on the ground for the lake.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. You know, the difference, I think, that people don't realize that is, you know, we are doing a lot of stuff at the State House and, you know, making these programs that we can provide to these other local lake associations. And just like Krystal said, they're the ones that are doing the boots on the ground stuff right there at their own lake. And then, of course, support New Hampshire Lakes. So we were just saying that we're doing the advocacy work, we're bringing the Lake Host programs and the Lake Smart programs and outreach programs, and helping other local lake associations be able to provide those programs as well. So it's really important, I think, to support both New Hampshire Lakes, as we're a statewide program and can do some of the work that the smaller lake associations can't quite do, but also make sure you're supporting them as well in your own backyard. So I did mention that you could go onto our website and find a list of local lake associations, but there is a large amount of information on our website. Pretty much anything lake related you could possibly think about is somewhere in there. So anytime you have a question about lake, anything really, you can go right to our website, type right in the search bar. We are at nhlakes.org. And we also are on social media. So you can certainly follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. YouTube is where you will find this recording tomorrow. So make sure you're following us. We put a lot of information out on our social media. We are sharing tips like what we've gone over in this webinar, things you can do to protect the lake. We are sharing information of what our local lake association partners are doing, different events they might have going on. We're sharing really important information from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services about cyanobacteria sightings. So certainly it's the easiest way to stay in touch with us if you're on social media. And we all want to work together, right? We're working together to keep these lakes healthy. It takes a village, as you all know, to do this work. So if we keep them healthy, they'll keep us healthy too. And we want to thank you for participating tonight and jumping in and doing your part. And we do have a little bit of time here left over for any questions that anybody might have. So I just want to remind you that you can scroll down to the bottom of your screen and type a question into the chat box. And I will also invite Krystal if she has any last thoughts or comments that she wants to say before we finish up here.
Yeah, well, I've also given people, we've got a small crowd tonight, so I've also given people the opportunity to unmute themselves. So if you are here joining us tonight, you want to unmute yourself and ask a question live, we've got about 10 minutes left and we would welcome any questions. Otherwise, you're just going to hear my small dog whining in the background, waiting for me to stop. Yeah.
And I probably need to change some settings here. So let me just go ahead and do that. Okay, so I have given our two participants here the ability to unmute if they would like to ask any questions. And of course, don't feel pressured if you don't want to pop on here and say anything. And we will, Krystal and I are always around. We have email addresses. You can find us right on our website. So if you do have questions after the fact, you can certainly reach out to us later. And we will be sure to answer any questions you may have at any time, whether it's about this webinar or anything else.
I have a question for Shirley. Have you posted your Lake Smart award somewhere?
We found a great place to post it. We have it posted so that people can see it from the road as they go by. And we got special brackets that we found that we have posted it to the sign on our docks. So it's right. And you would be surprised earlier this summer when people first started getting out of the lake, many people were slowing down and pulling in to see what it said.
I love that.
Yeah. And I have a lot of Lake Smart books that I've been passing out and spreading. I would hope to see there's a lot of other people that could be getting the Lake Smart and are close to getting it on our lake. And I'm hoping that we can encourage people to do that. We'll have a lot of signs.
Good.
Webinar great tonight. I hope a lot of people watch the recording because it was very good. Very well done.
Good.
Thanks, Shirley. Hi, Mimi. Thanks for joining us this evening.
No problem. I was driving home for a little bit of it, so I did listen in and every now and then caught a picture of what you had. So I'll probably look at your slides later a little bit more carefully.
Ooh, webinaring and driving.
Mostly listening and driving home. but yeah, no, it was very interesting. We're recent. We don't have lakefront property. We're in an association. So, and just fairly new, just got a house last summer. So very interesting. It was, we're, I guess, been seeing signs about the Chinese mystery snail and all that stuff. So it's interesting to hear a little bit more about it.
Yeah, well, welcome and congratulations on your new house. And
thank you.
Sorry about the Chinese mystery snails. They are stinky little buggers.
They're interesting. And, you know, they're big.
They are really big. Yeah. You know, so this is probably getting too much into the weeds, but we're really lucky in the United States, because in other countries, freshwater snails like this actually carry a parasite that, you know, that people can get just from so swimming in the water or something like that. And we don't have it over here, knock on wood. Hopefully it never comes over here. I'm not sure that it can survive in, you know, our environment. This is usually in Africa and things like that. But, you know, that strange freshwater parasite that these snails can carry, I was reading about a couple weekends ago, has to be treated by chemotherapy. So yeah, really crazy to learn about that. And, you know, just we might have some Chinese mystery snails, but at least it's okay for us to just pick them up and huck them out of the water, and we don't have to worry about anything outside of that. You know, we don't have to worry about them like
Yeah. I mean, how do they get there? And do you you know, will you ever, like, I know, like, our lake, they had said they had like a search, volunteers snorkeled and got rid of them. So many. It is, it's interesting.
Yeah, what lake are you?
We just saw one. Than that.
Oh, my computer's freezing.
In Meredith, Waukee.
Oh, you're in Waukee.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so, you know, Chinese mystery snails are one of those things where if the population is low enough, then the community can certainly get on top of it. I mean, the goal is to stop them from reproducing. The problem is they can so easily hitchhike in between water bodies on boats and things like that. And once they're in a water body, they can have a lot of babies. And so when you find those snails, anytime you see one, huck them into the woods. If you throw them somewhere where they will dry out, they can't get back into the water and reproduce. And everybody really dials down on that, you can actually have a good impact on their population. Granted, if it's already a really established population of Chinese mystery snail, it might take a lot more work than just that. But there's the lake that I grew up on over here at Pawtuckaway. Some of the kids on the lake have banded together to start snorkeling, as you mentioned, and they've got little underwater cameras, and they're going around the bottom of the lake and harvesting the Chinese mystery snails and removing them. So yeah, it presents a unique opportunity for people to get involved, at least. Yeah, what's up, Shirley?
Yes, I was wondering if those "Don't Feed the Geese" signs are available somewhere. I'd like to. I had never seen one before, and I think it's a good idea to post those at the boat launch, and maybe be a good place.
That is a good idea. Erin, I don't know if you know more than me, but as far as I know, there's no state or nonprofit initiative to make those "Don't Feed the Geese" signs. But it is, you know, maybe a curious campaign idea that New Hampshire Lakes could consider, since we have an established distributor, you know, maybe someday we could get a small batch of don't feed the geese signs, and
because they certainly are polluters.
really are. They produce a lot of poop.
Yeah.
Well, it's right about 8 o'clock.
Yeah. So what I would just like to thank you for tuning in, and I'd like to thank my co-host Krystal, my colleague, for giving us this great presentation this evening. And you know, like I mentioned at the beginning, we do have a couple more webinars lined up, so please do check those out, and we will go ahead and get this posted so you can take a look at those slides tomorrow, Mimi, or whenever you have time for that. And we will say good night.
Yeah, and Erin, the next one is Amy Smigula, right?
Yeah, and that's,
don't want to miss that one. It's
it's gonna be really good next Wednesday.
Cool.
Yep.
Well, thanks for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Very interesting.
Good night.
Good night.